Welcome everybody back to Scaled Success Reptile Podcast, episode 49. How's everybody doing today? We had a little bit of a break in between podcasts. Sometimes you just need a little break in between from the social media, the hustle and bustle stuff like that, but we're back to it. Really excited about the guest today. I think might be people might be a hidden gem within the hognose community and reptile community, with like what the experience they have in with animals and reptiles and some really cool species they're working with. But before we get to that, let me tell you a little bit about what's going on here at Closed Reptiles. So we just came back from not 2 weekends ago. We're a Reptilian Nation Atlanta. Big shout out to Reptilian Nation and Ryan for putting on such a great show, getting people out there to come out to the expo and stuff. And if you met you guys there, thank you for stopping by for our table. If you bought a hognose from us, really appreciate that. And if you have any questions about anything future that we're breeding, just send us a message on Instagram or send us an email, closedreptiles@gmail.com. We're always here to answer questions to help you guys out. So that is going on. We got a few weeks of break from vending, so that's always good too as well. We're actually pretty dwindled down to what we have available from the 2024 season. So always a great, sometimes a great position, but it's a difficult position to be in when, I like to vend. I like to be out there with the people and make those new connections and help the new reptile owner come into the hobby, especially in Western hognose. So that we got that going on. And then I think our next show is going to be Repticon Orlando. And after that, it will be Daytona. So, the big Daytona reptile show. So looking forward to seeing everybody there. This will be our second year vending. So if you guys are looking for anything specific, we'll post some stuff on the, on our Instagram, on the Morph Market. And if you're going to be there, you can pick it up there and, we'll go from there. So that we had another like 2 or 3 clutches hatch over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And, small clutches, but some cool little stuff here and there. One cool thing that I confirmed today was our Swiss male paired to our Purple Line Extreme Red Conda albino female. That female from the last year had issues laying these giant eggs. She couldn't just push them out. So the eggs that we had, I think we had 3 eggs that looked somewhat viable. 1 egg made it all the way through. And to our surprise, a little albino head popped out. So the biggest thing was the process of elimination. It was like, is it retained sperm? But it's not, because the animal is not Arctic. Because last year was paired to a super Arctic snow male. So that's a great, easy way to tell for us, and really cool to have that albino be hidden in there. Again, albino is probably hidden in so many different animals that we don't even know. It's probably like a couple breedings, 3-4 breedings down the line that there was albino involved, and it just wasn't listed because the possibilities are the breeder didn't know, or the possibility was just so low that sometimes not even worth listing. So that's cool, and it's a male. So it's Purple Line Extreme Red lineage albino conda 100% het Swiss male. So I haven't decided if I'm going to let him go or if I'm going to keep him. We'll see. We'll see how he develops, how he's feeding. And by Daytona, maybe I'll have him on the table for, a price that I'm willing to let him go. And if anybody's interested in him, message me and I'll keep you up to date if I do let him go. So we got that going on. And then, so that's pretty much it. Just waiting a handful more clutches to hatch. We have some females in shed again. So we might have some triple clutches. So that's another cool thing. We've never got triple clutches before. So we'll be interested to get that as well. So other than that, pretty much the same thing as usual. Before we get to guests and shout outs, let me do the quick sponsorship shout out. So first, USARK Florida. If you guys don't have a membership, even if you're not a Florida resident, make sure to go get a USARK Florida membership, because they are the spearhead of against fighting any legislations against reptiles and anything that will affect us keeping certain species or limit us keeping certain species. So go check that out. USARC National, they're the ones on the national stage fighting against any legislations. Same thing as USARC Florida. And then we had the Patreon, Clovis Reptile Patreon started this year. Little by little is growing. So big shout out to our Patreon members. Thank you for joining us. It's been building a community. We've had a couple of live video chats, and those are always great to get to know everybody and get to hear ideas on how they're keeping, what they're keeping, and what's the future. So if you're looking to join a cool community, a community that helps each other, check out Patreon, the link below. Now our sponsorships, Sea Serpents. Chris at Sea Serpents is the owner. Great guy, best customer service. So if you're looking for a incubator or PVC rack, go check out Sea Serpents. They do custom work. So if you're looking for something very specific, message him, email them, and ask them if they'll do something like that. One thing that I do have for Hognose breeders, and I confirmed it with him, and if you need the holes drilled for the pins, like the vision rack pins to hold the tubs in so the Hognose babies won't push out, email him, and he said he can do them. So that's a big plus because I know some people shy away from those hatchling racks because of the not having the pins, but he can do them now. So make sure you guys go out and check that out. Blake's Exotic Feeders. Blake is breeding and producing quail and button quail at his farm. So if you guys are looking to add some variety to your feedings for your animals, hit up Blake and tell him Clovis Reptile sent you, and it's directly from his hatchery to your doorstep, no middleman, so you get the freshest quail you can. Hognose have been loving it, so really cool to see that. Now, Husbandry Pro, if you guys are looking to try it out, use Clover 60 for a 60-day free trial. Again, track your husbandry, track your breedings, such a help with that, and they'll help you, just keep a record of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and if you need reference, it's a big help with that. So big shout out to all of our sponsors, to our Patreon members. Thank you for supporting us. And if you guys want to keep supporting us, make sure you drop a super chat tonight, subscribe to the channel, hit the like buttons for this video. And if you have any questions for Troy or myself, comment down below, and let's get to the show now. Welcome to Scaled Success, Troy.
Hi, Alvaro. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah. Man, I was mentioning in the intro, I met you at, I think probably Tampa Repticon. I'm not sure, but I met you one of the Repticons in the local, Central Florida area. And it's always cool to do these shows too, especially local, because you get to meet more people within, because you're not too active on social media, right?
No, not particularly. That's an area that I have room for improvement. We'll say that.
I hear that, man. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, man, and it gets sometimes overwhelming. But I'm happy that I can do shows and expos and be able to meet people like you. Get to know the local people in the area or out of state. Because we talked Hognose for a bit, and then when I asked you to come on the podcast, I did a little research, and you have a lot of experience in the reptile world and the animal world. So I'm really happy that, you came on, you spent some time with us tonight. So to start off, just give us a quick overview of, how you started, where's the origin start?
Oh, okay. So my origin story in terms of, we'll take the business aside and we'll just talk about like my personal thing with reptiles.
Yeah.
Oh, I was 8 years old. It was like 1992. So, it's been a couple minutes at this point. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to date myself a little bit. I ordered a green and null out of the back of Boys Life magazine, which is a magazine put out by like the Boy Scouts of America. And it was like live chameleon, buy it. And it's like, okay. And so that was my first pet reptile, was this little green anole, because I grew up in northern West Virginia where there's not a lot of lizards there. So like getting any sort of lizard was cool. And it's really just kind of snowballed from there. I've never stopped since the early 90s. And Mountaineer Herps, which is the business that I'm now running along with my partner Jenna, that started around 2019. So definitely quite a few years in between there before I really started to get into like breeding for sales purposes. I was working with all sorts of stuff before then. I was and still am a zoo animal keeper, and I'm also a college instructor nowadays. So I got my hands in a lot of different pots. And kind of ironically, as far as like reptiles go, as a zookeeper, I was never actually a herp specific zookeeper. It was more like general, and then I did like large mammals and like large carnivores, that type of thing. But I never really like the herp keeper per se. So yeah, it's been a long road, and I've settled on a few species that I really like. I'm a dabbler by nature. I definitely have a whole bunch of different projects going on, but where I'm really focusing my energy is definitely the Western Hognose. So that's our shared interest here, and that is easily the bulk of what I do, and everything else is a very distant second. And one of the projects that I work on that I'm really proud of is my Egyptian egg-eating snake project, because nobody works with them. So like I'm, as far as I'm aware, the only one in the world that's breeding those things. And that we're going to be forging ahead on this year's edition of that pretty soon.
Nice. That's great. So from young age of, starting with that and all, do you think that made the drive to going into the animal world as a profession?
Oh, for sure. Like that definitely. I always had like an innate interest in the natural world. I was a big dinosaur kid, and then I got a little more interested in things that are alive and I can see and touch and explore and look at. And so, and my mom was always very, very supportive. Tolerant is probably a good word for it. And so, yeah, they called it from the time I was in grade school that I was going to be working with animals. And yeah, sure enough, here I am all these years later, but
that's cool. So did you, after high school, did you go into college to pursue that career?
Yes, I attended West Virginia University in Morgantown, go Mountaineers. Graduated in 2006 with a Bachelor of Science degree in Animal and Veterinary Sciences, which is more like agriculture and like farm animal production, but it's also just general animal husbandry, restraint, various reproduction techniques that are used with farm animals, but are very applicable to non-farm animals. And once I graduated, I started out at my hometown zoo. I'm originally from Wheeling, West Virginia, and started at Ogilby's Good Zoo up there. I was there for just under a decade, and then moved down here to Florida, where I got employment. How should I put this? Because I probably can't say. At a large theme park in Central Florida that is run by a rodent.
There you go. Yeah.
I still am there part-time, and
Okay.
it was only about 2 years ago that I made the transition into education.
And you're doing education in the animal field, biology field?
Yes, yeah, I'm an instructor of, our department's called anthrozoology. So it studies the interface between the animal and human realms. And I was brought in because while I was working nights at that theme park, I screwed around and earned a master's degree, and that was enabled me to be able to go and teach at this college up in Leesburg, Florida, where I'm primarily was hired to teach biology. So that's right in my wheelhouse, and it works out very well.
That's cool, man. That's cool. It's funny how, like, you traveling here open other doors to be able to do different things, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So that's interesting, path. And then I think, like I've told people, it's like that same animal, inquisitive mind and stuff like that. A lot of us reptile keepers or animal keepers have had that since youth, right? It's just, did we pursue it, or did we fall off the wagon and then found it again, stuff like that. And that's my thing too. Is like, I loved it. Same thing. I grew up in New Jersey, so there wasn't like many animals, and I went to like this swap meet and bought an iguana. In like what, probably like late '90s too. Me and my best friend, and but then like life came, adulthood, didn't do much with reptiles, and then got back into it. But it's interesting to hear that, people that did pursue it all the way through into a profession and stuff like that. I think you guys have some pretty cool probably stories and interest in the animal world, especially that long ago. If you kept going from like that, that no, and getting all these animals when like the imports were, fresh and all that stuff, must have been very interesting to keep reptiles, especially within that time frame. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Coming down to Florida, when did the Western Hognose start in your collection?
That would be probably around, I'm trying to remember, 2016.
Okay.
Either 16 or no, it was 17. It was 17. Mm-hmm. I got my first one at the Daytona Expo in 2017.
Okay.
And that snowballed from there.
Yeah.
Trying to remember what my head count is currently. It's somewhere in around 100 breeding animals.
Yeah. So you had Hognose pretty early too, as well. 2016, 2017 is just when they first started rolling and stuff. What was your first morph that you bought? Was it a normal? Was it a visual morph?
It was a visual. The very first one I purchased was a Super Conda het albino.
Oh wow.
A female. Even by today's prices, I did pretty well as far as that goes. The guy selling was pretty. It was Sunday, and he was pretty motivated. But and she turned out to be a fantastic breeder. I nicknamed her Big Mama. Because she is large. She tips the scales around 550, 600 grams without eggs. Yeah, and she's not overweight, which is crazy. Well, she probably is a little bit, let's be honest, but but not like crazy obese or anything like that. And she routinely throws like double clutches of 25 plus eggs, like, so she, and always get a set of twins out of her. So like she turned out to be a real hidden gem of an investment. And so I started holding back her daughters to see if, and they're just now starting to breed. So it's like, okay, we'll see if you do the same thing your mama does.
Nice. And that's interesting because, 2017, you're getting close to like the 10-year mark with a hognose, right? Especially a breeder hognose. Now with her being a large hognose, do you see growth continuing after like the 3-4 year mark?
A little. And because I would say that she's, lengthwise, not weight-wise. She's probably gotten a little bit longer. I don't keep track of length. I find it tedious. So
especially with a hognose, right?
No, I'm like, I just use weight and just my eyeballs. So I would say body condition wise, she's more thin looking than she used to be, but which indicates to me she's gotten longer because she really hasn't lost a bunch of weight. So. But yeah, it definitely dropped off real hard after about year 3 for her in terms of growth rate. She was an explosive grower. She got to 200 grams in her first 18 months, and then she slowed down once she hit about like the 450 mark. That's when she really started to slow down. Which is, I've come to find, is exceptional. It's definitely not the norm. I have some individuals that are, barely cracking 100 grams at that age, and that's okay. Like they all grow at different rates. And for me, like starting out, that was one of the harder things to learn was, and like really just, get in here that they're all individuals and they're all going to do their own thing and they're going to do it in their own time. And so, just sometimes some of the things that you see touted as being, the rules, so on, so to speak, I found out they're more like guidelines
For
in many
sure.
cases.
Yeah. Putting these animals or practices into a square box of like, this is how you should do it, is very, I don't, to me, it doesn't make sense. Because like you said, I have hatchlings for 2023, 2 females, 1 female, same thing, right? Like, I think the first year blew up in size. At this, now at 3 years old, she is, or going to be 3, she is double the size of her counterpart, of the same female, like same clutch. So it's crazy to see, like you said, that they're going to grow out, be able to do different things and their own pace. Might be better breeders, or might be worse feeders, or whatever it is. You can't lump everything into one pile. It's interesting to see once you start growing out, especially start growing out your own animals, you can really see the difference, right, from the egg to breeding size, being able to produce them. With that female, when did you first produce animals with her?
Let's see, 2019 season.
2019. Okay.
Yeah, she was just under 2 years of age when she laid her eggs. But with her, I just figured she grew up so quick and got that body mass. I figured, okay, if she's this big, odds are she's matured, sexually. So let's go for it. Let's give it a go. And it worked. I mean, would I recommend that for every animal? Absolutely not. So like for anyone out there who's listening, who's looking to get in the hognose, my recommendation would be to just kind of use either age or body mass. Ideally both. Ideally you get both. But so like for me, 2 to 3 years on a female in age. Once they hit that 3rd year, regardless of size, unless they're super tiny, like 70 some grams or something insanely crazy, like in which case I just would never breed that animal, because it's like, okay, let's just not have those genetics. That's when it's like, okay, she's definitely mature. And the conformation of the head does change a little bit as they age too.
For sure.
Yeah,
that
especially in the girls, they get those.
Yeah.
They get the big mutton chops going on, and to me that's my indicator, because you do see the often parroted advice that the females have to be X number of grams. I think the most commonly thrown around number is 250, and I can say that's a good guideline for sure, but it's not a hard and fast rule in my experience.
I agree. Yeah. Like the 250 gram, it's pretty, I would say average, a 2.5, 3-year-old female will get about 250, right? But like you said, you have those females either that explode and get closer to that 300 gram sooner, or stay closer to like the 180, 200 below, right? I've bred, like you said, I've bred 180 gram female, double clutches, no problem. Maturity, the age. But like you said, you got to be able to watch and play by ear and seeing on age and weight in the situations like that. Same thing as like, have you seen the feeding charts, right? That you and stuff as vending and selling animals to, especially a lot of people that we see at these local reptile shows. It's first time buyers, very new to the hobby. When people ask you, what do you recommend to feed them, or what size? What's your approach in that? Because I don't think the chart is the best situation.
I agree with that. What you're saying there, the chart again, it's a good guideline. I'm gonna probably use that word a lot. Guideline. So it can give you an idea, and typically I approach that. I tell my clients that I do food sizes based off weight. So if the animal's a certain mass, and when I say certain mass, I'm talking empty too. So when I take weights, I usually wait until the day before feeding, if they're fed weekly, for instance, to weigh them. So they've had enough time to process the previous week's meal. And that way I'm getting more of their true weight, and I'm not just weighing poop. And which can definitely give you a false sense of what they actually are weighing in at. So I'll usually tell my clients that I feed this on this schedule, and I'll give the animal's specific quirks if they have any. Some don't have any, and some are quirky.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
and when they and I do often get asked, so when should I move up to the next step of food?
Yeah.
And I usually say, well, as a guide, for instance, I'll just throw an example out. I start feeding fuzzy mice right around 30 grams, because that's where I've found that most of them are able to eat them and hold them down and
Mm-hmm.
do all right, and then that does help along their growth too. Pinky mice, it's such a painfully slow process in terms of growth when they're on pinkies. But I also tell people to not push it either. So, like, if the animal doesn't want that, or if the animal eats that and then doesn't want to eat the next week, okay, maybe keep feeding something a little bit smaller. And of course, worst cases, you have a regurgitation, which is rare, but it can happen. In which case, okay, give it a week or two to recover from that, and then reset and go back with a smaller size. And then I have some individuals that I swear to Pete, they'd eat a doorknob if I threw it in there. So
Yeah.
like, and they don't care how big the food is. So those I have to watch on the other end. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's make sure I'm not feeding you something too crazy because I know you're going to eat it,
Mm-hmm.
but I also don't want to
Mm-hmm.
stretch out your gut and do things physiologically that aren't real great for you either. So
Yeah. Yeah. And with hognose being such a small species when they're starting off, right? It's easy to do because, like you said, you have those individuals that you might be feeding a large, let's say a large pinky, but if you put a fuzzy in front of them, they're gonna go at it, right?
oh
And
yeah,
sometimes they can take it down, and you'll have that issue where you can see it's just such a large meal. I think as a newer keeper, probably it could be easy to make that mistake, and then the regurgitation problem happens. And we all know, if you have a regurg from too large of a meal, stuff like that, you got to give it a break. And if not, you're gonna have that issue again um, with that. Now, I jumped, a little bit on the feeding, but what drew you to the hognose specifically?
ooh, they're cute. I mean, that's I don't have a better answer than that. I mean, there are other factors that weighed in for sure. I mean, the
Yeah,
small adult size for me was a big plus
yeah,
because that means I can have more of them, so, with less space and smaller feeders. So like,
hmm
so for me, like that made a lot of sense to go in that direction because for and I still do to a lesser extent, but have space is finite, so
yeah,
I decided to keep something that I enjoyed that was diurnal, that I could see out and about and I could observe their behavior more readily. Because then I feel I can pass that information along to whomever.
yeah,
Because it's like, well, it was doing something while I was asleep and I'm assuming it's okay. But but with the hognose, it's like, oh well, this guy's all over the place all day long. He's doing this. This one likes to surf the front of the tub. This one's always ready to eat as soon as you open the tub. So I can get that feedback on them, and they do have loads of personality too. Like they definitely are very personable little snakes. And I tell people all the time, they're like, well, how do I handle them? And I said, well, if they're not happy, they will tell you. They're very
yeah,
honest communicators. So,
yeah,
and it's like, so just bear that in mind. But the coolest thing on the other side of that is they're not, I hate to use the term aggressive, but they're not bitey. There we go. Because it's not aggression. It's defensive
hmm
behavior. But
hmm yeah. And I tell people all the time too. It's like with the hognose, you do have those individuals are hissy all the time.
oh yeah,
They don't change, but then you will get once in a while that very how would I say it, like very calm individual that will have, I guess it's having a bad day, or you scared it because you pulled the tub too fast. Maybe if you have a glass enclosure, you opened up, you made what's it called, a quick movement, and it put them on high alert, right?
yeah,
And once they're in that high alert, it's hard to break them out of it unless. And it's interesting because like once you pick them out and you start handling them, if it's not a usual like hissy, puffy hognose, they'll chill out. They'll understand that you're not a threat. And that's what I explain to people as well. Is sometimes they're very cage defensive, right?
yeah,
Enclosure defensive. But once you pick them up, they understand that there's no harm, or they coming to senses, like, okay, this person, this thing is not going to eat me. We're good now. Hopefully it feeds me, right?
Oh
Because
yeah,
that's one thing with hognose, man. I've heard a lot too with people that I'll see at reptile shows is, well, hognose have issues feeding. And there can be issues with feeders, but what I've seen is like when there's a good established hognose, it's pretty easy to feed. As long as you pass, like you said, you pass that information down. Hey, it's, you might have that one individual is a drop feeder. So as long as you drop it, it's going to go and get it and eat it, right? It feeds off tongues and stuff. But having that information is very important sometimes as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think every hognose keeper should at all times have a little collection of various scents at their disposal to utilize for the occasional stubborn one. Or I sometimes find that when they come out of brumation, they can be kind of stubborn to get started again. And sometimes just a quick dab of fill in the blank, whatever the scent may be, gets them right back on track, and then they're fine. So I do think that's a very useful thing to have. So I have just various frozen, we'll call them juices, of various critters that live in my freezer with all the rest of my rodents. So like I do have a very special freezer that only has dead animals in it. So like it's animal feed or things that have passed away go in there until I have a chance to do something else with them. And because I do like to make like wet specimens and stuff like that. Because
that's cool.
And yeah, maybe one day I'll have enough to I might be able to let some of those go, but for right now I'm just hoarding them all. But
I hear that. With the hognose and the species before Mountaineer Herps, the business, it was just, as a hobbyist doing it because you liked it. When did the business mindset come into play?
Pretty shortly before I got into the hogs, and for sure that definitely helped guide the decision towards the hogs as well. It's a small species that's prolific, and I saw that they're on an uptick in popularity. So I thought, okay, being able to rehome babies was going to be, I won't say easy because it never is, but easier than some things that the market's more saturated with. Nothing against ball pythons, but there are a lot of them. So, and I actually breed ball pythons just on a very, very, very small scale. I do like 1 or 2 pairings a year. But, and yeah, that's part of the reason why I gravitated towards them with the business, because I was like, okay, well, there's a demand. I have the expertise to work with this species, gain some expertise with this species, and then be able to leverage that and market that and work with that. And so that's kind of what I've been doing. And the business has been growing slowly and steadily, which is the way I like it. I think if it was like an explosive growth, I would get overwhelmed. So I'm kind of thankful for that kind of slow but continuous and obvious growth. Like this year is going to be our biggest year in terms of numbers and in terms of offspring, and so we're just very excited and fortunate to be where we are.
Yeah. With the production, what is your production looking like this year?
Oh, I actually have the list of the eggs I already have. So it's up. But so far, I'm just going to do a quick count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 hognose clutches so far, a false water cobra clutch, and a corn snake clutch. And that's just so far. I've got a couple more hognose that are bound to pop any day now. They had their prelay. One was 9 days ago, one was 11 days ago. So like they're coming. Got a corn snake ready to lay, and the false water cobra is probably going to drop a second clutch here before too long. And the Woma pythons, that's probably a dud again this year. I paired them up and done. And that's the second year I've tried with them. But you know what? That's fine. I don't get discouraged by failure too easily. So it's just like, okay, it didn't work this year. We'll give it a go next year. They're still 100%. Cool, and I still like them. So.
Eventually you'll get it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you have the animals and stuff like that. Um, with with the hognose production, so let's say on average you're getting, let's say on average 10 eggs, right? So you're
Mhm.
looking so far between 140, let's say 180 babies and stuff like that. That's a pretty good season for
Yeah.
smaller scale breeding and stuff. You have corn snakes too, you said, right?
Yep, I got a couple, we'll call them token pairs of corn snakes that
Okay.
I'm working on. Like I got a pair of the Miami phase, and the ones I'm waiting on right now, it's a het palmetto by het palmetto. So
Mhm.
hoping to get some palmettos out of that.
Nice, nice. So yeah, so you're breeding a handful of different species, not just keeping them. Um,
Yeah.
how do you manage what to breed when and different like is there any species that has to you have to really be different types of setup for breeding?
Sort of. So in terms, the one that I really kind of do something very different with, that would be
Hmm.
the Egyptian egg eaters.
Okay.
And with them, they're from this tiny little oasis in Egypt. It's about 900 square miles, something like that. It's very small, and the weather turns out is pretty much identical to what it is here in Florida, just with less rainfall. So they have a very well-defined hot season and then a cooler but not cold season.
Okay.
And so I simulate that. So I do brumate them and have been successful with that. But the thing with them is when they hatch, they're eating finch eggs.
Hmm.
And I have some finches that live in an outdoor aviary to produce my own food for them. But the finches lay their eggs best in the wintertime here. So between November and March, give or take, is when they're laying the best. So I have to time when I brumate them to where the eggs are hatching that time of the year, which is why right now they're on their fasting phase before brumation. So I'm going to be putting them into brumation probably July 1st. And
Okay.
then I'll keep them down for till about Labor Day. And then I'll pull them out. And by the time they breed very quickly once you get them out of brumation. And once the eggs take about 70 days to hatch. So that puts me having babies right around the new year. And so, and that works out very well. Last year didn't have success with them. I bred them in 2020, 21, 22, and 23, but last year, or sorry, 22, last year. No, yeah, last year was 24. Good Lord.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
last year
Yes.
that last year I didn't get any eggs out of them, but that's okay.
Okay.
So we're gonna try again this year, and it's a niche market for those for sure. But I do find that I there's a niche but very eager community of people that enjoy them. So I usually don't have any trouble moving them, at least online.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah, definitely probably not a too much of a local reptile show animal, right?
no,
Um,
not really. If I have some, I might bring one just to
mhm,
show them off.
mhm.
And if someone wants it, great. But I kind of have learned that they're an oddity, and some people are very curious about them, but understandably not really willing to pull the trigger on something they didn't know relatively little about. And that's responsible, and I
Yeah,
support that.
no, for
Uh,
sure.
s- so I think I've sold like one egg-eating snake at a show in ever, and so they
Yeah,
don't get a lot of love
that's
at the
got to be a
shows, but that's okay.
very specific person looking for that animal, right? At a
Correct.
show.
Yeah.
It's not going to just be most of the time. It's probably not going to be like the passerby looking, maybe haven't decided what they're going to get. Hey, I'm going to get an egg eater, right?
Yeah,
uh,
especially not a juvenile that's eating like little bitty eggs and stuff
yeah.
like that. I do try to like the ones that if I take them to a show, have them up to a size where they're eating a more readily available egg.
Mhm.
So like button quail, for instance, lay little bitty eggs that are good for the juveniles, but and they grow pretty quickly into that phase. But that
Yeah.
way, because finch eggs can be tough. Like I do
Yeah.
have sources that I can hook people up with if they need them. I unfortunately can't surplus any of my own. Like I need every egg that they produce for
Mhm.
my own purposes. But um, I have found several people over the years that do breed finches and sell the eggs for exactly for that purpose. So
Wow.
so I am able to refer people who want hatchlings to those folks, and they've been able to be successful
That's
long
cool.
term. So it's really cool. I'd love to see a day where those egg eating snakes are very common. but they're niche. They're care-wise, they are pretty easy. I describe them as corn snakes that eat eggs.
Okay.
I mean, like care-wise, they are pretty straightforward. It's just they rarely get big enough to eat chicken eggs, and so like sourcing their food can be
Okay.
harder for sure.
And they're solely egg eaters? Like
Correct. Yeah,
okay.
they only eat bird eggs.
Okay.
So very, very specialized animals.
Yeah.
And they're pretty cool. Like I like the whole genus, but I work mostly with the Egyptians.
Okay. That's cool, man. Yeah, I looked at some pictures. They're pretty cool looking animals, man. So it'll be interesting that, that oddity to have in a collection, with and then back to the hognose. What with the animals you're hatching and you're breeding this year, or any future stuff too, what is like your favorite morphs that you're breeding or looking to breed?
Ooh, that is always the hardest question.
Or just
I mean,
what morphs are you currently working with? Yeah.
I'm dabbling in a whole bunch of different morphs at the moment, but so I would say that like in terms of what I'm hatching this year,
Mhm.
things that I'm just excited for in general, some things that I haven't had in the collection before. Like I finally got my het leucistics up to size,
Mhm.
so hopefully going to get at least one Lucy out of the deal this year. That'll be nice. And I know that they've kind of fell off from a certain standpoint, but I still think they're cool, and I will continue to work with them even if other folks move on from those projects, because a lot of people consider it a dead end.
Yeah.
But and that's okay. Teach their
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
Another thing that's been kind of like a white whale of sorts for me is to produce a super yeti. I am set up this year to where I could potentially do that, so
Keep fingers crossed. Yeah.
keep fingers crossed. That project, man, I call it my cursed project, because like I've had either females that didn't get that didn't get any eggs. I've had females die egg bound. I've had clutches fail. Like that whole, or if they did hatch, not a single super yeti in the lot. So like that's kind of my white whale, and that was one of the first morphs that really drew me in. Same thing with an Azanthic superconda, or like anything toxic, like the
Yeah.
gray stuff. I really like the gray stuff, and I like the pink things.
Mhm.
I recently started working with like the Sub-Zeros and stuff, and they're just really
Yeah.
cool and highly underrated. I'm also kind of a fan of the toffee glow morph, even if I do kind of suck at IDing it and hatchlings.
Well,
But I'll get better.
man,
I'll learn. I'll get there. But right,
and those are always
right,
going to
right
be
now.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Ideally, albino morphs, or T positive, T negative, it's going to be always difficult.
yeah, I'm just sitting there, especially when the pairing, like the pairing for this clutch of toffee glows that I just got. It was a small clutch, it was 5 eggs, but it was a AAA het toffee bred to a toffee glow.
Mhm.
So all the babies are visual albino no matter what. So it's like, okay, or T-neg albino, I should say, just to
Mhm.
be specific. And of course, we have Arctic thrown into the mix, which can throw off identifying
Yeah.
the toffee portion. So these guys I might have to hang on to for a little while and let them get some size on them before I can really confidently say. Like I have several that I strongly suspect are toffee glow.
Mhm.
I might wait for them to grow a little bit before I put them out there with that that label on them, so to speak.
Yeah, man. And and that's not a project that too many people work on as well. So it's hard to find reference, or even somebody to like, hey, does this look like one? And then sending a picture to somebody too, that's another issue, right? Like even if they're working with
Yeah.
it, it's like, oh, it's hard to tell from a picture.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
send a picture, or you see a picture and you tell somebody like, "Hey, what do you see?" And they're like, "I see an albino." Like, and it's like fair, but
Yeah.
because it's like I'm looking at it and I'm seeing this hue and that hue, and they're like, and I'm looking at the picture, I'm like, that's not in the picture at all.
Mhm.
And so it is challenging, and I don't have any data to back this up, but part of me does suspect that maybe the challenge in IDing the visuals is part of the reason why some people don't do
Well,
that project.
100%. 100%. I agree with you. That's one of the things that definitely will probably hold people doing, either the toffee glows, the high binos, what else? The caramel albinos too, all that stuff, because there's difficult to ID 100%. I have some stuff that I hatched this year that are either might be hypo albinos, right? Same thing as last year. I kept those just because I don't know. They look different to me, but I'm just going to keep them and breed them and see. That's going to be by the process of elimination for me, is breed them and see, okay, it is what it is. If not, then it's just a cool looking albino, very distinct albino. But if it isn't, it gives you a reference point of how to ID them. Okay, I was right by picking this one out, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's another cool part about Hognose too, where even though in the last 2 years there's been an explosion of people breeding them and producing, there's still very a small amount of people still producing compared to other species. So we have still a hard time IDing with certain things or comparing, certain combos to what's out there. We're just getting to like the triple gene, quad genes. It's gonna be crazy, man. Once we see like 5 genetic combos in Hognose.
Yeah, when we have like Hognose with a morph ID name that looks like a ball python's, where it's like, it's a paper bag, 100% het rocks, whatever.
Oh, wow.
Fill in the blank with whatever
Yeah.
names they come up with, but
it's gonna be wild, and it's gonna eventually get there because the speed that's growing, and more people are getting them. That's the only way to like keep it going, especially for the people that are ahead of the curve, is just gonna be adding more until we find more genetics, right? More new morphs and stuff. So with are you producing toxics and stuff that this year too?
Yes. Yeah, I've got a toxic conda female that laid for me. We'll find out who the dad is when they hatch. She had 2 males that she was paired up with. She was paired with a sable double het toxic and with a xanthic conda het toffee. So hopefully I get some sort of indication. I either a super conda to indicate the one, or none of the above to indicate the other. And that's gonna be a cool project either way. Like I'm happy regardless of who the dad is. It's like what are they calling that with the toxic of the sable? Is that acid
rains? Yeah,
acid rain. Yeah,
I love that project. That's one of like I push that project on everyone I talk to.
Yeah, I've got some. Maybe we'll see if this sable pos head is xanthic. Turns out to be a xanthic. Might get some storm clouds this year, so pretty excited about that. Cool. Which is another cool one for those out there who aren't familiar. They're blue. They're blue snakes. Like
they're when they're born, they come out the egg. It's cool because it's a nice contrast of dark pattern with the blue background hue, almost like it's glowing blue behind the dark pattern. Very very cool combo. So that, man, you got some good animals, coming, even if it's a sable het toxic, that's a really good combo there. Very good future project animals. So hopefully the sable het toxic, is a dad there. With that, it's funny because I have my toxic clutch this year. The eggs just hatched a couple of days ago. I had a conda toxic male that I got him. Wasn't the best feeder, hasn't grown into size, even though he's like 2 years old. Just a very small male. I put him with the female. The female is a 5-year-old, I think maybe 6 now. 350 gram female, a big female. The male is maybe 50 grams. So just a big difference. So I threw him in, didn't see any action. I threw a conda toffee 66 Swiss male to her. Hey, at least I'll get some what's it called, toffees, conda toffees out of it. And after seeing the outlet, no xanthics, and I got conda toffees, and pretty good pattern too. The male has like a really nice like conda stripe pattern that breaks down into like spots at the end. And I have a couple offspring that have that same pattern. So it's pretty indicative of which male is the actual breeder there. So now like I have some conda toffees that are pas het Swiss. It's like, once do you take the gamble, keep them back and stuff? That's another cool part about breeding your own stuff too, right? It's, let's see
Oh
what
yeah.
you keep, and let's see if the gambles, because sometimes the gambles pay off.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we had one hatch today actually that we were Jen and I both were just like admiring it because it was a freaking cool snake. I mean, there's just no other way to put it. The pairing was albino super conda, pos het axe, and she was bred to a caramel. So these babies are conda, double het.
Albino caramel.
Yeah, albino caramel. Thank you.
Yeah.
And this one hatched out. It is probably the highest expression conda I have ever seen. It has two very faint stripes that go most of the way down the body, but just continuously get lighter, and that's it in terms of patterning. And so looking at it, experience tells me this animal, you might have a little bit of that striping right behind the head as an adult. The rest of that's going to go away. Like that, it's just going to fade out, and it's just going to be a really cool animal. It's a little male, because of course it is. I mean, we have a little joke in the house. It's all the cool ones are males. and so we're thinking that's going to be a holdback just to see what he grows into, because he's just a really cool animal, and he hatched out nice, big, and chunky too. He's 10 grams right out of the egg. So
nice. Those are always good.
That's my favorite when that happens. I'm like, yes.
Yeah, man. And then with sometimes you'll get those females that just consistently produce some nice, big, chunky animals too. That's the same situation with the het toxic female that produced the kind of toffees. It's those animals. I haven't weighed them, but I would probably say one or two are probably like 12 grams. Like they're just big. Yeah, and it's crazy to say because like we're talking about hognose, we're like, oh, big babies, 12 grams.
12
right?
grams. Whereas people who breed other stuff are like, what?
What? That's a little worm. Yeah.
Like
it's
12 grams. That's how much the feeders weigh.
Yep.
The pinky rats were feeding out like they're
yeah. So with your morphs and your pairings, you got some cool stuff coming up. Anything that it's on your radar to add to your collection?
Yeah, a little bit. Probably looking to get an unrelated caramel albino, at least het, to pair up with that individual as it ages. That way, because I try to avoid inbreeding whenever possible, or at least known inbreeding, we'll call it, because we don't truly know how related anything is. So, try not to breed the siblings or cousins or distant relatives or anything like that. And that's just a personal thing. I don't have anything against people who do that. It's just, that's just something I try to avoid whenever possible. So that's definitely something I'm looking to add. And regardless of how the leucistic eggs hatch out, I'm probably going to get myself a visual at some point this year. It's either going to come out of an egg or I'm going to buy it. One of those two things. It's happening. And one of those two things is happening. And the Swiss stuff, again, we're going to kind of wait and see what happens, because we have a pos het Swiss female that I bred to a het Swiss male.
Nice.
So
hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah,
we'll see. And if not, he's het axe. He's an anaconda, as het axanthic, het Swiss.
Nice.
And the female he was paired with is a conda, double het snow, pos het Swiss.
Okay.
So, the way I look at it, worst case situation there, get some cool axanthic stuff. Like, oh no, because other people like gray snakes too. So I'm perfectly okay producing the gray snakes. I'm not the only one that likes them. So that's a pretty cool project. Maybe invest in a het, like a true het female this year. The visuals are just a little bit out of my price range at the moment, so probably won't be buying any visuals on them. But just trying to think if there's anything else I'm really looking to add. offhand, I can't think of anything else that we're really looking to add at this time, because we're waiting to see what we hatch out, and then we're going to go from there, because we've got maybe some PPA stuff on the way.
Nice.
I was looking at the tub with the female in it, like, hey,
Yeah.
lay your eggs. She's 9 days after
Nice.
the pre-lay.
Oh,
It's like, come
any
on.
day now. Yeah.
It's like, come on, girl,
Yeah.
let's go. Just to hatch out some PPA stuff, because I do think the PPA stuff is cool, and I'm glad that it's kind of making a resurgence, because I do remember years ago that was one of the first morphs that came out, was the PPAs, the pink pastel albinos, for those who aren't familiar with the acronym. And then they went away because we were seeing lots of like wobble type issues, like neuro type issues, and well, it turns out it's probably because they were highly inbred. And so that was just kind of exacerbating that cause. So a lot of people have outcrossed them, and have been reporting they're fine. So, okay, so let's get into them then. Let's do that.
Yeah. What's it called? Mitch from Fathom Hogs just hatched some really nice. He's been working with the PPA stuff, and he has some galaxies kilowatts. So like the PPA.
Yeah, he's getting this. He has some killer like kilowatts that they posted the other day. I saw those. I'm like,
Yeah,
man.
So
he's always killing it out there.
Yeah, he's one of those people that really what's it called? Put his belief behind the PPA and started working it early. It's like, okay, let me figure this out. And it's paid off for him because like you said, he's hatching some really cool stuff. So it's interesting to see that. I don't have any PPA stuff in my collection. To me, it's a cool morph, but to me, my personal, right, like everybody has their personal, like what's it called, preference. It's another albino, right? And stuff like that.
Fair. That's fair.
But there is some cool combos, like the PPA Sable stuff. I mean, anything with Sable probably is going to be cool, right?
Sable is like the ultimate enhancer gene.
Yes.
In my opinion, like it
100%.
just makes everything better. And so it's going to be really cool to see like what some of these Sable combos look like
once we start seeing more triple visual Sable combos.
Yeah, triple or even quad visual stuff. Like it's going to be really interesting to see how those projects go. And I think as time goes on, we might maybe see something similar with Swiss. I think it's a little too early to definitively say anything about that. I'm sure there's someone out there who's a lot more ahead of the game than I am. It's like, oh yeah, or like, like they're either nodding or shaking their head, one or the other right now. But so we'll kind of see how that works out and how that gene interacts with other genes. Because and I did have several people say to me, like, feel like the Swiss and the Sable are the same snake, and it's like, I can see that. It's like, but this one, the head is dark. And I'm trying to tell the differences, and they're just looking at me, and I'm like,
it's like
it's a brown snake. And I'm like, all right,
you're out of your mind. Yeah, no, and I agree, man. With especially with the Swiss, because they're so comparable that we have to see in the combos how they age, all that stuff. Where we're right now is a shot in the dark. Like you said, there's probably people that are working. The originator, he's throwing some stuff out. I see, to Jules.
Yeah, Jules is out there.
But it's hard to really know what's going on with the animal when he posts certain things, because it's very vague on the posting sometimes, right? But and then they're just coming out. I think he's just hit a Swiss snow. But it's just a baby, so let's see what it develops to, right?
Yeah.
And stuff like that. I think to me, it's like any animal. Let's see what it develops after a year, after 2 years, see how it looks. With that. Now, what other Sable combos are you working with? Because this year you have some storm clouds, possible storm clouds coming out.
Storm clouds, maybe some sunbursts.
Nice. Okay.
Coming. I had one female that was a sunburst project, but she slugged out. And all right, that happens. And then another one laid. So we'll see how that works out. And she's Arctic. She's an Arctic albino het Sable, and she was bred to some like double. She had 2 males. So she had an albino anaconda het Sable boyfriend, and then she had a Arctic double het sunburst male. I was like, there, I was struggling. Sometimes I'm amazed I can remember all these pairings, but it's like when
It's
I'm
a
putting
lot,
it
man.
through. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah. That's I mean, you got some good parents coming up. With that and the future, with the amount of animals you have, do you see yourself continuing to hold back and grow? How to with the hog nose?
probably. I think for right now we're getting close to our spatial capacity
Mhm.
around here, which is fine. It's the best problem to have as far as I'm concerned. And there's always a way to expand
Fine.
operations
Right.
a little bit. So like, and we'll explore those options as they they come up. So yeah, the growth is the goal. How much growth to be determined. It's like more of a just seeing what happens right now and seeing how things turn out.
Right.
Uh, because I mean, you're going to have some years where things go really, really well, and you're going to have
Mhm.
years where they don't. And so that's like the biggest challenge with breeding is that it is essentially farming, and so farming is a high risk type of venture, and so is breeding reptiles. It's high
Mhm.
risk. So like you could put a lot of effort and money and time into a project and have it blow up in your face, and you could have the opposite happen too. So I think we're gamblers by nature, just to be doing what we're doing.
I agree, man. And you make such a great point where it is a high risk hobby, business, whichever, or hobby business, whichever way you want to see it. And having that mindset does help continuing it, right? Because I think if you're that person that expects to have a great season every year, to have no losses, either the breeders, animals you hatch or eggs or whatever. That's not the reality, right? I think
No.
you will quickly realize that it's way too many variables in it to be able to say, well, I'm gonna have this many eggs, I'm gonna produce this and that. I think if you come in with the mindset that these are the possibilities, these are the negatives, these are the positives, you have an easier way to balance it out if the negatives do happen, right? Like if it's positive, everybody's
Yeah.
happy, you continue your day. It's when you're expecting these animals and they don't go, they don't lay fertile eggs or whatever it is a difficult part of it. And like you said, it's farming, right? You're gonna lose animals, you're gonna just have difficult times. With that being said, it's like if somebody's looking to get into breed reptiles, either hognose or other species, what will be your like recommendation or advice for them on how to like continue going on in it?
My biggest piece of advice is, well, there's more than one piece of advice here.
Yeah.
So but my number one advice is be patient.
Mm.
Patience. You have to be patient, because if you're not, you're going to burn yourself out and you're going to be in and out pretty quickly. So you got to be patient with it. You might be, for instance, growing up we'll say a female, because it's always the females. Let's be honest. And you're hoping that she gets to X number grams, so because she's X number years old, and you'd really like to see her at this weight before you breed her, and she just decides to go on a 4 month hunger strike or something like that, and it's just like, all right, pack your patience. We'll do it
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah.
We'll just on to
Yep.
the next year. Okay. Or when you have like fertility issues, because that's something that I don't think it's talked about enough, is that just because you pair them together does not guarantee eggs at all.
Mhm.
Like, and then sometimes you have incubation issues. So
Yeah.
like patience is key. Uh, Being willing to accept failure is definitely very important. And on the flip side, uh, knowing how to handle success is probably also a pretty prime piece of advice. Like
Mhm.
don't get too cocky. Stay humble. Like that's definitely number one.
Yep.
Because sometimes it's easy to let ego come into play.
Yeah, for sure.
So stay humble. Remember, you're always learning. The animals are your teacher, and listen to them. Like they
That's
will
good
tell
advice.
you. They will tell you what you need, and that's any animal too. That's just good general animal advice. It's like, listen to them. Like if they're behaving a certain way, try and figure. And you're like, well, that's weird. Maybe try and figure out why. Maybe they're trying to tell you something.
Yeah.
So, for instance, I had like a hot spot, for instance, with one of my racks set to, I think it was like the mid 90s is what I had the tape set at. So the actual in there was probably like 91, and all the snakes are at the cool end all the time. So what I do, I turned off the heat. So like okay, we're done, and they're great. They're doing fine. So granted, it's a warm room, but in
Yeah.
general, but uh, so that's just one, for instance, of like, okay, that animal's telling me, those animals are telling me they're all saying we're too hot. And so I turned it down. They continued the behavior, so I turned it off entirely, and now they're behaving more or less what I would consider to be typical.
Yeah.
And we also can see that situation with feeding too. That's another big one. They
But
might not like your feed schedule. So like listen to the animal and what it's trying to tell you. If
yeah.
it's like, if it eats 1 week, skips the next week, and then eats the following week, and it does that consistently, scale your feeding accordingly. Just feed that animal every other week. That's how often it wants to eat. Okay, cool. And if it seems hungry, there's no harm in trying again. The worst thing can happen is it says no. So
yeah, man. You know, and you definitely touched on a point, because I was going to ask you, what do you think is one of the most overlooked aspects of breeding hognose? And you know, you touched base on fertility. So what is your thoughts on like infertility with hognose?
well, I haven't been able to nail down anything specific that seems to trigger infertility per se. I mean, there's just some individuals I found that no matter what you do with them, no matter who you pair them up with, and again, this is females I'm talking about specifically, will either not lay or lay nothing but duds every single time. And it's like, okay, well then it's time. And for me, I retire those animals. It's like, okay, I have a 3 strikes rule. So like if you slug out 3 times in a row, all right, next batter up. Let's get you out of the rotation. And the males, I do try and pair them up with proven females if I have an unproven male, just to make sure it's not him. Or if I have a female that I suspect is having fertility issues, I use proven males with her, so I know that, at least at one point in time they had sperm that worked. So I'm able to put them together and work with that. So I mean, in terms of things that are overlooked, the potential for infertility is definitely one thing. Maybe in some cases, compatibility between the males and the females, because I definitely have a few females that certain males, I put them in the enclosure and
They're
they
not going.
they are not happy. They are immediately bucking him all over the place, slapping him around with their tails, and just playing the avoidance game. Where if I put a different male in there, they let him breed her. So it's like, okay, and I would say that's probably less of an issue overall. It's just anecdotal, something I've noticed. And I mean, I think that brumation is very important in breeding them. Not necessarily to be successful, because you can certainly be successful without brumation, but it does help sync up their
Their
reproductive cycles.
Yeah.
And it's equally important for males and females, because that lower temperature kind of kicks off things in their brain. And I'll skip all the nerdy details and go straight to, they're producing good sperm, they're producing good eggs, but there is a whole cascade that happens there. But and that lower temperature kicks it off. Whereas otherwise, you're kind of just playing shuffleboard. Like, is she cycling right now? Is he producing good sperm right now?
Who
Maybe.
knows?
Maybe. So if you're choosing to go that route, I've never really tried it personally, so I can't speak too much on it, but logically to me, that would say probably just pair more often, just to try and compensate for that. Whereas with the guys I have, I pair for about 2 to 3 months, and then that's it. If they didn't get the job done in that time period, that's it. All right, better luck next year. So,
and talking about compatibility with males and females, right? Like it's always good to have backup males too, as well. I think that's another part we see. Like everybody goes in full force for females, and then sometimes might forget about a male. Let me have a backup here. Let me have something, even if it's a single gene that's compatible with the female, I can throw it in there and actually get some kind of reproduction there and stuff like that. I always tell, even if you have extra males, like, oh, I have this male I haven't used in 2 years. Yeah,
why not?
keep them around. You never know.
Throw him in there. Get a Thunderdome going. Like it's because I 100% agree with you that having surplus boys is better than having surplus girls. I mean, I'll say that straight out, because some boys get real shy and they'll just bury and they'll hide from the females until you throw another male in there.
Yeah,
and then it's just like competition. Oh hell no! I'm gonna get on this, and so that definitely helps having that little bit of competition, and I think that more closely mimics what these animals will be actually doing out in the field. Is you're gonna have your female going along, leaving her little pheromone scent trail, and then her milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. So like all the males are gonna start showing up, and it's gonna be a big competition. And so for some individuals, so if you're pairing them up and you don't really see much going on, throw in another male, or at least throw in a shed from another male, because I found that to be pretty effective too, to get things going, because the males will smell that, and sometimes it'll look like the males are trying to breed each other first before they go after the female.
I've seen that too.
Like, and it's like all right, good energy. Let's redirect that elsewhere. But good energy. All right, good energy. Let's keep that up. But yeah, now that you bring that up, yes, I do think that is an often overlooked thing, especially when you're having like the converts from like the python breeding community, where it's commonplace to have, a 1-to-3 or 1-to-5 ratio males to females. Whereas with hognose, it's like 1-to-1 or 2-to-1 or sometimes 3-to-1 is the way I've always done it and been successful. Could you be successful spreading one male out amongst multiple females? Probably. I've just never really done that, because I had somebody else tell me, well, I have really good success this way, and I've been successful, and maybe one of these days I'll experiment with it and just see if I have enough like single gene females or something like that. I'm just looking to screw around a little bit, just see how far that can go. But so yeah,
I think two females per male is I'm not gonna say I'd rather do 1-to-1. Like one male would breed one female. 2, I think you can push it. 3 is I think you're really swinging for the fences there. I think with the size of these males, they get I think they get it's too much for them, especially for how soon you need to breed them. After brumation, trying to rotate them through different females, it's a lot to do. It's definitely a lot to do. With females and males, do you prefer having like visual morphs on either side, or really doesn't matter to you?
It kind of depends on what I'm doing. So like if I'm looking to prove out something, I use visuals for sure. So because that way, that's one less variable. So it's like this one for sure has that gene and it's pure breeding for that gene. And of course I'm referring to recessive traits there, but and so if I breed it to that animal, I have better odds of finding out whether that gene is present or not. And sometimes you can come to a point where it's kind of like, okay, well, is she or is he, as the case may be, do they have the gene or not? Because we got 4 eggs out of it. So like, to me, that's not enough of a sample size. So it's like, okay, we got to try that again before we can definitively say no, or yes, for that matter. Granted, it only takes 1 for a yes, but but yeah, that's definitely something that's important.
Yeah, man. with your experience in, your profession with the animals, what bits and pieces of experience have you taken into like breeding reptiles?
All sorts of things. So just learning animal behavior was like a huge one. And animals, as different as they can be, they're also remarkably similar in many, many ways, in terms of how they behave, the way they're going to act, the way they're going to react to certain
Mhm.
situations. So like as far as breeding reptiles goes, number one, and definitely being in a field where I'm working with captive wildlife is that helped me learn my patience. It helped me definitely focus on the patience, especially when you're working with things that you can't physically interact with. So
Yeah.
large carnivores like lions, for instance, where it's like, okay, I want you to do this, but if that animal has a different idea,
He's gonna do whatever he
I have
wants.
to pack my patience until that animal is good and ready to do what I am asking it to do.
Yeah.
And reptiles are the same way. So like if I want them to breed and I put them together and I do everything correctly, quote unquote, and nothing happens, it can be frustrating.
Mhm.
But I learned enough that it's like it will happen eventually, and sometimes it will happen when you're not looking. Especially when you're not looking is when the real magic happens. Because a lot of these animals are just they view us as a predator, so they're going to be
Mhm.
on guard if we're around, and so you might not catch your animals breeding,
Mhm.
for instance. And other things that are transmissible to like the reptile world is it made me way more aware of laws and legislation that
Mm.
impact the keeping of captive wildlife, particularly here in Florida because we do have a lot of rules, especially compared to where I grew up. I grew up in West
Yeah.
Virginia where there only recently have become to have rules. It was the Wild West up there, and still is in Pennsylvania, which was right next door. I could drive 10 minutes and be in Pennsylvania. So it was like the scene up there was very different than what it is down here. I can say that very confidently, just in terms of like what you see typically and
And then I
that
guess
type of thing.
too, seeing rules that affect the individual rather than affect like a zoo or accredited facility, right? Is totally different too. Um, with the breeding process in reptiles, what has you think has been the most like let's say like crossover with the mammals and stuff like that?
Probably the biggest one, especially when it comes to breeding, is to have what we would call a disposition plan, which is just kind of like zoo jargon for know what you're going to do with those babies once they arrive.
Mm.
Have a plan, and don't just breed willy nilly. Breed with a purpose, which is what we're doing when we're breeding for these various
Mhm.
traits that we're looking at, but also breed with the intent, with in the back of your mind, well, if this doesn't sell, I brought this thing into the world, it is my responsibility. And so try not to produce more than you could keep, if at all possible, or at least couldn't easily rehome. We'll say
Yeah.
within fill in the blank time period. For me, I like to anything that I plan to sell, I like to sell within its first year.
Hmm.
And that's kind of a housing issue. So that unless because once they get to a certain size, they need bigger enclosures, that type of thing, and that's at more of a premium around here than baby slots are. And so for me, I don't sell a lot of like juvenile subadults or adults, because usually most of those animals are for breeding and they're being held back.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, and sometimes when they get to that size, it's like I might as well keep it at this point, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like I've already fed it for a year. Like, all right. And if it's a male, it's usually pretty close, if not ready to breed by that point, at least
Hmm.
by weight. Um, with the boys too. Like, I'll ask you, like, how small do you like to go with the males, for breeding
Um,
purposes?
Man, so I've bred 50-gram males, but then like I've noticed larger males do better. not large, but like 70-gram males, an extra 20 grams makes a big difference, especially with the bigger females. I think sometimes the smaller males will get intimidated by big females in situations like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've kind of found the sweet spot is 70 grams plus, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a really big male, in my experience, like the 100-gram plus boys, they tend to be kind of slouches. They don't really get after it the same way the smaller kings do. So it's like, all right, but and I have like experimented with some as small as 35 grams, just because I heard some people had success, and I was like, okay, but I'm not pairing that 35-gram male with like a 300-gram female.
Mm-hmm.
Like to me, that's asking for trouble. Like he's very, very bite size.
Yeah.
So that'd be more like a 180-gram female or 165, 170-gram, like one of the smaller girls. And that's where the experiment is. And well, if it might be a successful experiment, she's looking crafted and she's going into sheds. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with that. And so yeah, the males, I would say maybe we underestimate them to a certain extent. But yeah, for me, the sweet spot on the boys is like around the 70-ish gram range. And that's where I like to try and maintain them if at all possible. Some boys just naturally get bigger. And that's all right. So I try not to feed for that, but if it ends up happening, it ends up happening.
Yeah. And one thing with males, as they get older, once they hit like the 2-year, 3-year mark, you'll have those males that will skip feedings, and just like, hey, I'm not hungry today and I think that's another great way to maintain that size, perfect, range for breeding. So like when I have males that, I'll feed this week and maybe they'll skip 2 feedings, I don't freak out because I know they're good breeders. First of all, they're that perfect size. I think a male that wants to eat all the time will eventually get like that slouch male, and you got to taper them back and be vigilant.
Throw them down a little bit.
Yeah. And then another thing too is like extra males that I have, and I saw that this year with being the 3rd year of breeding, is some males that are just been chilling for the last 2 years. I still brewmate them and everything, but they are gaining some weight because they're not breeding. They're not expensing, that extra calories. And then they're not going through, a lot of them aren't going through that breeding fast that some males do as well. So I noticed that, and I was like, okay, you need at least 2 to 3 weeks off, every 2-week feedings now instead of every week, because he's not wasting that extra, calorie intake.
Yeah, and something else I've noticed, particularly with the males, is that their weight can fluctuate real fast. That's something I've definitely learned from them, is that a 2-week feeding schedule might be great for some males, and they maintain weight beautifully on that schedule. Some males, they'll just drop weight on that schedule. So it's like, okay, again, this goes back to listening to them. Their weight is a way of them communicating. So it's like, okay, if we're dropping weight, even though we're eating, that tells me we're not getting enough. So let's bump up your feeding schedule. So like maintaining a schedule can sometimes be challenging. And that's when apps like Husbandry Pro come into play. I use that. I use another app. It's very basic. It's called Time to Feed. That's on my phone. So I have everything in all these different categories. So it's just like, okay, so I know exactly how many rodents I need to pull and when and all that fun stuff. So that everyone in that category is on the exact same feed schedule. So when it's their time, I can just pull enough for that category and here you go. And that's kind of how I manage that. And then there's some boys that will conversely kind of blow up on a certain schedule. They'll get real fat. And so you got to back them off. The females I found overall tend to be less prone to that in any direction. The females tend to maintain weight a bit better. And I think that's just bigger body mass in general. Like 1 or 2 grams to them is way different than 1 or 2 grams on a
it could be like 10%. Yeah, it could be 10% of the male's weight.
Yeah. So like, and So like usually I don't freak out with the males too much unless they're losing like a certain percentage. Like if they've lost 15% body weight in 2 months or something, it's like, okay, let's revisit what we're doing with you and let's get you back on track. Let's get the weight back up on you. Because I do have some boys that just seem to have higher metabolisms and they just seem to burn their food differently, and so they'll drop weight a little bit quicker, and I just got to keep an eye on them. I mean, there's no signs of disease or anything like that going on. They just need to eat more
Yeah.
than some other boys, and just like us, they got different metabolisms. It's not one size fits all, and I think that's a something that in general in the reptile community that we need to appreciate as a community more. I'm not saying people don't, but especially the newcomers who think that you have to keep everything on a very regimented, very scheduled, and it's like, well, not really.
Not really, yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of wiggle room
For
for
sure,
sure.
for sure. And I remember being in those shoes when my males, especially the first breeding season, it's like, man, these guys don't want to eat. They need to breed and this, and it's like I gotta feed them. And it was a stressful. Now it's just sit back and wait and watch. Yeah, keep an eye on them and see if they're losing weight. You can visually tell, especially on males,
Oh
they
yeah.
start losing weight once you get the visual experience. But yeah, it's one of those things that I think as humans, and I've heard this a lot, we try to impose our feeding habits onto reptiles, right? Or we have mammals, or that we got to feed every day, dogs, cats, that we're used to that, and it's like, well, I got to feed my cat every day. So if they told me my reptile needs to eat every week, it has to eat every week. If not,
Yeah,
I freak out, right?
it's gonna starve. It's gonna starve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because that just reminded me of this story years ago. So if you bear with me, this is a little bit of
Yeah.
a tangent. Uh, where I had a zoo guest come in and she was looking at, we had African painted dogs.
Mm.
And so if you're not familiar with them, they're lean. These are lean animals. They're built to run. They're built to hunt. And and she was very concerned about how malnourished they were.
Mm.
And then she's showing us pictures of her Labrador. That it's like, oh, it's like, labs aren't supposed to be 125 pounds, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and so I think some people do that with snakes for sure. Because circling to a snake, we had a snake donated to the zoo that was it was a Burmese python,
Mhm.
and they said she was 18 feet long, but as soon as we saw her, we're like, and so we did measure her, and she was 13 feet and some change, so they were way off. But and she weighed almost 300 pounds.
Oh wow.
She was a telephone pole, and that's not healthy. So the first thing we did is we put her on a very much a crash diet. We fasted her for like 5 months before we fed her anything, and then we started feeding her like a rat every 3 weeks just to manage her behaviorally because she was
Mhm.
getting kind of cranky, understandably so. But she was losing the weight. And then I think obesity is a problem in captive reptiles for sure.
Mhm.
Like you see a lot of it for the exact reason that you alluded to, is that some people just can't comprehend how slow their metabolisms are by comparison to ours.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we're way up here. Like
100%. Yeah.
birds are up here. Birds are a little bit higher, but like we're way up here, whereas reptiles are way down here.
Mhm.
And that can be hard for some people to like really, really truly appreciate, because they're like, well, it ate, and it's like, yeah, it's made to do that. It doesn't know when its next meal's coming, so they're wired to do that.
And one thing about that I've noticed, especially with hognose, is, and any of the snake species that I keep, is majority of the time they sit on the heat is when they are processing their food, right? After that, they come off of it and they're moving around. They stay on the cooler side. It's just that initial like feeding day and day after. And I keep all smaller species. I don't have anything big, so it's a
Yeah.
quick digestive system and stuff like that. So that's another thing too, is like they once they've processed that food, they come off the heat and then their metabolism drops, right? Because they don't have that heat that's burning calories and driving their metabolism higher. So that's another, I think, another, again, watching the animal, understanding their behaviors, um, with that. And I want to, any other tips on hognose or behavior that you've watched in just like keeping, especially for the first time keeper, because you know we see this a lot, right, in the local reptile shows. Is um, I want to put my hognose in a large enclosure. I want to put my hognose in this 30-gallon and it's 20-30 grams. What have you seen in behavior wise with large or smaller enclosures with hognose?
Well, I think it kind of depends on how you set up the cage.
Hmm.
That's what my experience has shown me is because there is a certain logic in the idea that the wild is massive, but we also forget that they live in microhabitats within the wild. So, like, yes, there's a giant field here with 300 rocks in it or something, but that snake might live around 2 or 3 of those rocks and kind of maintain itself to a rather small area. And so with snakes, what I often tell people, hognose or otherwise, is if you want to put a juvenile into something bigger, well, number one, you are going to be running the risk of them going off feed if you don't set that up correctly. And so I define correctly as being, think of what a forest floor looks like and do that. Put a lot of crap in there, lots of branches, lots of plants. They can be plastic, they can be real, whatever floats your boat. Just be aware hognose will dig up the roots on the live ones, so there's
Yes.
that. Lots of hiding opportunities, lots of nice tight little nooks and crannies. And if it happens to be a glass enclosure, darken a couple of those sides. Like, help the animal so it doesn't feel like it has to, keep its head on a swivel when it is out. And you could be successful that way, which I know that does run a little counter to traditional advice. And the traditional advice, of course, is that you try to maintain it in something small until it gets bigger, which I absolutely endorse. I do endorse that. And I've been personally successful both ways. So I think if someone's really mindful about how they set it up, they can be successful in a bigger enclosure. But for a beginner who may not have like the same level of experience of what we'll call it properly outfitted enclosure might look like, I would say, follow the KISS method, keep it simple, stupid. So let's put it in something small. Keep it how the breeder was keeping it, because that's what that animal's more used to, a more confined environment that they're going to feel more safe in, and then you can get away with having a more basic setup because they're already feeling nice and tight.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think is overlooked sometimes when setting up enclosures is hides. Not providing them. We all provide hides, or we should, at least if we're not. But the style really makes a difference. I've been very successful with having a hide where if it's, let me grab one here just for a visual. So something like this, and this is nothing fancy. This literally came from the Dollar Tree. It's a little pencil drawer that I'm using as a hide. And so what I do is I'll bury these to about there into the substrate. So the snake is actually crawling in here and its back is rubbing against the top of this. And I found that that's very important, especially for the more nervous individuals, to feel something literally touching them when they're hiding, because then they're like, okay, well, a predator isn't going to get me from above or from the side because there's something solid here.
Yeah.
So I only need to watch this way. And it tends to calm them down a bit. So it's not just providing a hide, but being mindful of how it works. So if you have a hide that's like one of those like half logs or even like that, it's kind of high. If they crawl into it and they got a bunch of space to the top, well, are they actually hidden? From their standpoint, maybe no.
Yeah.
And that's another instance where you have to watch their behavior, because I've had some that are really, really defensive, and then I do something like put a flat piece of plastic or something in there and they just crawl under that, and complete demeanor change. They become a much more calm animal. They're not as hissy, they're not flicking poop at me and like all that other lovely stuff that sometimes comes along with a nervous animal.
Yeah.
So
And that flat type of hide, either if it's like a plastic or cardboard, whatever it is, or that pencil drawer you're using. I recently saw that and picked it up from like other colubrid keepers, like rat snakes, pitchwolf stuff.
yeah.
Because I've seen people do that. Just lay a cardboard in a either a hide, a tub or enclosure, and they crawl right under there, and they're perfectly fine, right? So it's interesting to think about what you're explaining right now.
Yeah, and I do think that, especially if you have a really high strung animal, or an animal that's, you might label as high strung because that's what you're seeing, because it doesn't feel secure. So it's scared. It's scared all the time. So it's like living in survival mode, and so that's why it's so tense. But sometimes an environmental change can be very helpful for those animals. Yes. I've seen it with other species too. Like some animals, I like clear and opaque tubs for my racks. I like those because they let in light, and I feel like that's important. I don't like the gray tubs because they don't. Well, I have some animals that very much disagree with that take, and they calmed down and started eating and behaving more normally once they were put in a dark tub. Some children's pythons that would tell you that these children's pythons were terrors until I got them into something that was a little bit more dark for them. And it's like, okay, if that's how they work and that's how they feel secure, and okay, then that's what I'll provide for them.
Yeah, for sure. No, and that's, I think right there, that was such a good information for the beginner keeper. And I think once you start dealing with beginner keepers, having that explanation or having a quick guideline is so important. So that's appreciated, because I'm definitely going to clip that and repost it, because it was really, you hit the nail on the head with that, with working around that issue. Now, before we run out of time and stuff, the tentacled snakes.
Tentacled snakes, yes.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you, I had to Google it because I've never heard of it. Maybe I saw a picture here and there, but it's definitely a very uncommon animal to keep. How did you find it? How did you get into these?
All right, so tentacled snakes. I'll just give an introduction of what they are real quick, and then I'll answer your question. So not a lot of people have heard of them. They're definitely a very niche snake. They're native to Southeast Asia. They're particularly common in like Thailand and Vietnam, and they're fully aquatic. They occasionally may come out onto the land. I've provided them with haul outs, and never, not one time in years, saw them ever use them. It's not saying they didn't, because I'm not watching them 24 hours a day, but anyway, they eat fish, and only live fish. That's what they eat. And so I like to describe them as a snake that you keep like an aquarium fish, because it really is that setup. It's an aquarium. They're fully aquatic, nice warm tropical water, and I feed them live fish. So live fish get thrown in there, and we get to enjoy them until the snake devours them, and then they get restocked. And I got into them a number of years ago because the zoo I was working with got some in, and I'd never heard tell of them. So I began to do all the reading that I could on them, and turns out, well, there's not much information out there, even in the scientific journals. Like there's just not a lot of info about these snakes. And so I began to do a lot of observations on them and such while we were keeping them. It's like, okay, well, I know they live in a warm tropical environment. There's seasonal rainfall, and they eat fish. And that's about it. So what I would do is I would fluctuate their water level a little bit with the seasons. And then lo and behold, we had babies. And it's like, oh, okay, because we kept them communally. We had a group of, I think it was 6 to start with at the zoo. And it was in like this 180-gallon tank that we had. It was a pretty big aquarium that was only filled about halfway. And so I got to be very interested in them. They give live birth, and
oh wow,
so they give birth underwater. They live underwater, like and they seem to enjoy each other's company, which is, I know, very anthropomorphic. But like they have plenty of options because they hook onto things with their tails like a seahorse does. they have all these options and they're all together, sometimes anchoring on each other, which says to me like there's a social aspect there that I think is underappreciated.
Yeah.
But and so we began to learn a little bit more about them and like how to maintain them successfully and breed them and all that fun stuff. And I took it upon myself to write an article for Reptiles magazine about them a number of years ago. It was in, I think, 2012, something like that.
Mhm.
It's been a few years. And once I left that zoo, I kind of decided, well, I want some of these things.
I want to try.
And like they're really cool, and frankly, they're pretty easy keepers,
Mhm.
honestly, especially if you have fish experience. If you know how to maintain a fish tank, and you don't mind sacrificing fish, like you'll do fine with these snakes if you want some. It's the finding them. Finding them is challenging. Not a lot of people work with them. They're very infrequently imported because they tend to not do real great in transport because they don't do great out of the water.
Mhm.
Their ventral scales are basically non-existent, so they like sitting flat on their bellies seems to be uncomfortable for them because if you take them out and sit them down like that, they'll only sit like that for a few seconds before they get real squirmy
Mhm.
and they start trying to like just move anywhere they can. And they're also considered a pest in their native range because they get into like the ornamental fish ponds and start eating the ornamental fish. So they're often used as crocodile food, honestly, in their native range. So they don't come in very often. And I finally got some a few years back in like 2016. Uh, and they did really, really well for me. That grouping, the last one, he did pass away like in November. And I had him since 2016. So like about 8 years. And it was a wild caught. So God only knows how old it actually was. And there is a guy down in Fort Myers who does work with them. His name's Mike Clarkson. So shout out to him. That's where the specimens I have now came from. And yeah, they're just a really cool niche snake that I could drone on about for quite some time. But suffice
Yeah.
it to say, watching them eat is like it's always cool to watch snakes eat. But watching these snakes eat is really cool. They sit in this like J-shaped, there we go, this like J-shaped pose, so kind of like a fish hook, and they'll wait. A fish can go by here on this side, they'll ignore it. A fish goes right in front of them, they'll ignore it. They're waiting for a fish to come up towards their body. And what they do is they flick a muscle in their body here. It vibrates the water. The fish picks that up in their lateral line, and the fish instinctively moves away from that, which positions the fish's head towards the snake's mouth that's coming right at that head simultaneously. So it's like it's so fast you can't see it with the naked eye. And the fish turns literally to get grabbed right on its head, and then the snake just swallows it down. And a lot of times, if you blink, you'll miss it. It's so
That's a
friggin'
wild.
cool. It
Yeah.
is so freaking cool just to watch them do that.
Yeah. I remembering. Let me see if I can
Yeah,
zoom
yeah.
in
If
here.
you got a video
Um,
there, then
I
or a
mean,
picture at least
a
of what they look
picture
like.
of
Yeah.
what they look like. Yeah, man. Because they're really cool looking animals. These tentacles. What is the purpose of them?
Yeah, it's not fully understood what their purpose is.
Okay.
But the researchers who've been looking at these guys, that's the number one question they had, because this is the only snake species that we're aware of that has more than one, what we call a rostral projection. So this
Hmm.
thing coming out of its face, essentially. They have two. Most snakes that have that feature only got one. So think of
Hmm.
like rhino rat snakes, for instance, just
Hmm.
to throw one out there. And so they've been doing some dissections and some microscopic dissections of of that organ just to see what it is. Is it ornamental? Does it have some sort of sensory purpose? And it turns out it probably does have a sensory purpose. They found a lot of nerve endings in there, which indicates that they're used for something. And they seem to be reactive in the same way that what we call mechanoreceptors are. So a mechanoreceptor is a type of nerve cell that responds to mechanical stimuli.
Hmm.
And in the case of these snakes, they're picking up vibrations and water movement. So it's thought that maybe those tentacles allow them to hunt in low light or no light conditions because they can feel the fish going past them with those organs. And so that is right now the leading idea as to what their purpose is. They might have even more of a purpose than that.
Hmm.
When they're out of the water, they kind of flop. Like they don't have a lot of muscle in them. You don't see them like doing this or anything like that. They're just there. So it's kind of like the noses on our face. Like we can't move our nose, they can't either. So and when they come up for air, they droop down and you can't even see them anymore. They're like laying on the side of their face. But so it's a really cool, very unique organ that's on these animals that gives them their name. And they're just a really cool, underappreciated species that I do hope gains some traction over the years. I know dedicated guys like Mike, he's killing it with these things. I haven't bred them outside of the zoo setting myself yet, and I think that's mostly because I just have rotten luck in getting a pair. So it seems like the majority of the individuals I get seem to be male. And okay, that's fine. And I'll just keep on keeping on.
What's the deal with sexing them and stuff like that? Is it pretty easy, or is it just a draw of luck?
It's definitely it's challenging. I think that's a good way to put it, because again, like they don't really have ventral scales, and that goes with subcaudal scales as well. So like you don't see that same nice, neat patterning of scalation on their bellies at all. And so you can probe them. It's challenging because again, you don't have subcaudal scales to go by. So you can't be like, oh, it went in 4 subcaudals, so it must be a female, or like it went in 11, it's a male. So it's more of a, well, it went in deep-ish.
Yeah.
And you can pop them, but I've never really drummed up the bravery to try that on a juvenile, because they are born at about 3 grams. They're very tiny. And so I'm afraid I'm going to break it. So it's like, okay, well, it's best to leave it alone. And then as they get older, the musculature there is pretty strong because their tails, they use those tails to anchor onto things. So the muscles that hold their hemipenes in place are also pretty strong. So that can be pretty difficult to work with. So I found that the best way, at least for me, to sex them is rather than probing, rather than popping, waiting for them to shed and then carefully unwrapping the shed and looking for the hemipenes. And that is a pain in the ass, just to put a real fine point on it, because that's the first thing that breaks off on the shed, when they do shed their skins.
And when do they shed? Do they shed underwater, or they come up on?
They use themselves.
Okay.
I've only actually caught them shedding one time, and they will actually turn in on themselves and use their own bodies to slough their skin. I've never had shedding issues because obviously humidity is not a problem for them. But I did try doing like DNA sexing through Rare Genetics with them, and because DNA degrades in water very quickly, it wasn't successful. Like they were fresh sheds, but that water just trashes the DNA real fast. At least for like the assays that they're using, which fine. Because I contacted them. They're like, well, I don't know. Let's do it. I was like, can you guys do this? And they're like, maybe. They're like, depends on how good the DNA is. I was like, well, I got this shed. I found it today, and I got it out of the water, and I dried it out the best I could. And they're like, all right, let's try it. And they're like, nah, it's. And I tried a few more sheds, and they're like, nah, it's always too degraded. So maybe if you find somebody that can do a venipuncture and get them some blood, they'd be able to do it. But
yeah, man, it's such an interesting snake too, because like, with how long do they stay underwater for?
Depends on what they're doing. If they're mostly sedentary. They're definitely ambush predators. Occasionally they get the zoomies and they'll be doing laps around the tank, and if like when they're breeding, they're going to be chasing each other around a lot. So if they're active like that, they're going to come up to the surface probably every 5 to 10 minutes or so, and then if they're at rest, it can be half an hour, 45 minutes or better before they come up for air. Kind of varies, but that seems to be fairly average. And when they come up, they tend to stay up for a few minutes. So they'll gulp plenty of air. It's like they're really trying to get all the old air out, and then they just suck in a big breath, and then down they go, and then they stay down for however long they feel like it, and they'll come right back up. But they
Interesting.
can definitely stay down longer than 45 minutes, though. I've for sure observed that. I've seen over an hour, but half an hour, 45 seems pretty average for
Okay.
time in between breaths.
Yeah. And then breeding them, they breed underwater as well.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep. They breed. They live their whole lives underwater, and I think that they live in a similar lifestyle to like a betta fish.
Mm.
So like they're small bodies of water that when the rains come, it floods and they're able to move to a new place, and then they go over there, hunt for a while, wait for some rain, wash, rinse, repeat. And I think that is kind of how they live their life. I'd love to get out to Thailand sometime and just see how they exist. And I
Mhm.
have heard rumors of an introduced population in Homestead. I have
Interesting.
yet I have yet to go down and confirm or deny this, but
Okay.
so that's something for those people who like to do field stuff. If you want to go poking around in some canals in Homestead, hit me up because uh, particularly near a certain reptile wholesale facility. How about that? Is where they've allegedly been found. So
Gotcha. That's funny. With and touching base on field herper and stuff like that, with your experience of other animals, mammals, have you taken some personal time to go out and like either field herp or what's it called, like observe some of the animals you worked with in the wild?
yeah, whenever possible. We did a lot of work, particularly I did field stuff for both of the zoos I worked at. So
Mm.
we'll start here in Florida. We'll start with the
Mhm.
more recent stuff. We did sea turtle stuff.
Okay.
We had lots of stuff with sea turtles. The loggerhead sea turtles, we because Florida is the largest nesting area of that species in the world.
Mhm.
And so we were going out, we were doing nest monitoring along select beaches on the Atlantic coast. So we would go out and we would watch these females come in. And once she starts laying her eggs, that's when we go to work because they kind of go into this trance where you're not really going to disturb them. So
Mhm.
that's when we go up there and we start doing all what we call morphometrics. So we're measuring their shells, both length and width. We're measuring how wide their head is. We're measuring how long their front flippers are. We're measuring their weight when they're done laying eggs, which that's a rodeo, let me tell you what. But because she does not want to be picked up,
Yeah.
and she's very heavy and very strong. And we're drawing blood. We're doing all this stuff with them. And what we were doing the last time we went out was like health assessments. So we were seeing how these nesting sea turtles were basically managing themselves throughout the nesting season
Mhm.
because they do multi-clutch, and we're finding that they probably don't eat a whole lot during that time period, because we had certain females come back in that had been out and we tagged them before earlier in the season, and they'd lost a significant amount of body fat.
Mm.
And we use this little device. It's often used for like commercial pig operations. It's called a lean meter, and MEAT is how they spelled it because clever. And so it basically measures the thickness of a fat pad. And sea turtles keep fat pads right here,
Mhm.
whereas a pig, it's going to be on their flank or something. And that we found that there was significant reduction in the fat pads throughout the season. So it tells us they're probably not eating much, and they're relying mostly on that stored energy. We also did work with gopher tortoises here.
Mhm.
So we were tracking them and kind of seeing how they utilize their habitat. So further guide Florida Fish and Wildlife and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service on how to make recommendations on how to try to find the middle ground between development and preservation of habitat. Um, and now, obviously, I don't keep sea turtles, but I've definitely worked with gopher tortoises before. And at my previous zoo in West Virginia, we maintained a pretty large collection of hellbender salamanders,
Okay.
and we did a lot of field work with them as well. So we were going out into the streams and catching these things and finding out what they ate, how big they were, what type of habitat they prefer, what does their diet vary with the seasons, what's normal blood chemistry for a hellbender, what's normal microbes to be found on their skin. We were because they're so understudied, left huge areas for us to
Yeah.
kind of cover and do basically whatever we wanted in terms of investigation
Mhm.
to find out more about those animals, and we learned a lot for sure. One thing we definitely learned about them is that the babies and the adults definitely do not live in the same habitat.
Interesting.
And Yeah, and we didn't know that until we started releasing captive raised offspring into the wild and tracking them and finding out where they were hiding. And we're like, this is why we never find juveniles when we're doing field surveys. We're looking in the wrong places. And
Wow.
so it was like really cool information to get, and it's just, it is really kind of wild to see that. And at some point, I am going to get out west and go try and find some wild hognose out there.
Man,
And
that's on my bucket list too as
I
well.
want to do it, and that's mostly because I'm not only just to do it, but I'm genuinely curious because they have such a massive range.
Mhm.
I mean, they range from northern Mexico all the way to southern Canada, and it makes me wonder if some populations like are phenotypically different.
Mhm.
So like, are some populations bigger on average than others?
Mhm.
And that might explain like why certain morphs, for instance, tend to grow smaller. So like toxics, for instance, are kind of
Mhm.
notorious for being on the smaller side. Well, do the lines for toffee and azanthic originally come from a population where the animals were generally
Mhm.
smaller versus like some of the bigger animals? And I don't know. To me, that's an interesting question, and I can't find it anywhere in the literature because I'm a
Yeah.
dork like that, and I read scientific journals. But and so
No,
yeah, that's something
and
I
I
want to
think
do.
we need a little more of studies like that, right? Done, and somebody like you that has a base to start off, and really like, okay, let's see where we're getting with this. And that's not, you made a great point where like such a large range for a species, where the variance, where I've heard people say, and I experienced it too, the sables stuff sometimes will hatch earlier than other stuff that is could be laid same day hatching, but will be like hatch earlier. And the hypothesis there is because they're from a cooler range, they hatch
Yep.
quicker and stuff like that. So that's another cool species, part of our species too, and with morphs to think about that, right?
Yeah, it's like, where does this morph descend from?
Yeah.
Like, what population is this gene originally from?
Hmm.
Because yeah, and we see like the tremendous variation just in the wild type coloration. We see like all sorts of variation, like in terms of color saturation, in terms of uh, body size for sure, how quickly
Hmm.
they grow. Like that, we see this type of variation, and I wonder if that just has to do with where they were collected from
I agree.
originally, because we generally don't, with few exceptions, like some of the Cascade County, Montana, for
Hmm.
instance, like we do have some records of where certain individuals come from, but by and large those records are non-existent, so we don't really know where within
Yeah.
this gigantic, nation sized geographic range, like
Mhm.
where they come from. And so like, yeah, I'm sure it makes a difference on some level.
And then also too, I think the small sample of wild type, wild caught animals that we brought into it is very small I think very small population where who knows where it's hard to track, right? Because
Yeah.
there's such a small areas. Like eventually, like we were talking about earlier with inbreeding, eventually there's some inbreeding going because of the
Oh yeah.
small wild caught genetic pool that we pulled from.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, yeah, like we talked about earlier, that's we assume that it's unrelated because you got an animal from this guy, and I know
Mhm.
I got my animals from this guy.
Mhm.
I mean, there probably is some degree of relation between them,
Yeah,
and that we just is small enough that it doesn't really make a difference, but it's still there, and we're
for
just
sure,
unaware of it.
for sure. Troy, with the closing the podcast of tonight, great information, man. We're
Thank you.
definitely gonna have to do a part two, because I really want to dive into some of the other species that you keep and some of your more zoo practices and experience that you have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, with your current hognose breeding and stuff like that, what's the best way people can find you or reach you?
The best way to reach me would be to go either through Morph Market,
Mhm.
uh, and Instagram would be number two. Well, I don't post a lot, but I do monitor the account. So I do keep eyes on it. It's just content creation is just something that I need to be better at, like I mentioned at the top. So that's also on my 2025 to-do list, is like do better as far as that goes. But yes, I can be reached through Instagram or Morph Market, the Facebook as well. But the Facebook doesn't love to send me push notifications, whereas Instagram does. So Instagram is a little bit better for that. Because the Facebook account, I'll go in and like check every couple days or so just to make sure I didn't get anything. But I don't do that daily. I probably could and should. But so yeah, Instagram and Morph Market are going to be the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Okay, cool. And then when would you think you have available stuff for 2025 if somebody's looking for some of the projects you're working on?
If somebody's looking for something from me, the babies I got now, I would estimate, because it's always an estimation, that they'd be ready to go probably by August.
Okay.
Or sometime in August. I won't put a date range, but just sometime during the month of August, I would anticipate those to be ready, and full availability for sure, like September, October. This is when I would be pretty confident saying I'll have a pretty nice selection of hognose to choose from. And if you're interested in egg-eating snakes, if I get any this year, I should have some probably around the 1st of 26. Okay. So it's later this year.
Okay. Next show you're going to be vending? Do you have anything on schedule?
Yep. This weekend, actually, I'm going to be in Largo, the Show Me Reptile show in Largo, Florida.
Nice.
And then my next show after that is going to be Repticon Bradenton, which is in August, I believe. Yes, it's either August or September. I'll have to double check my calendar. And then I'm going to be at Repticon Tampa in November. And if the odds are in my favor, I'll have a table at Repticon Orlando. But I'm still on the wait list for that one, so we'll see how that works out.
I hear that, man. Man, Troy, great conversation. Thank you for joining us tonight. The viewers, please go follow Troy. The link to his Instagram is below, so go follow him on Instagram. More follows are going to push him to put more content out. So check that out.
Make me be better.
If you guys have any questions about the hognose, the egg-eating snakes, tentacled snakes, hit him up. Pick his brain, and we'll definitely have him on for a round 2. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and we'll see you guys on the next one.